Hello and welcome to the Spooky Booktacular on the eve of Halloween. Just a few disclaimers first because I don't want to have any injuries for those of you who are faint of heart. Some of tonight's readings may be disturbing. They may be dark, they may be grotesque, so you have been warned. Any reverse writing you may encounter is due to Facebook and not the fact that I'm trapped in an alternate reverse universe or the result of any demonic imaginings. Any dogs you may hear in the background are not the hounds of hell, and any ambient noise you may hear is not the grinding of souls. So now that I've gotten my disclaimers out of the way, we're just going to have some fun. It's going to be, scary but lighthearted. It's not like I'm going to pull my hair out or anything like that. So anyway, we'll get started. I'm going to start off with the first the first story in my new book this year. It is the title story in Optimist Journal of the End of Days. And the inspiration for this story came about from the fact that I actually do keep a favorite things journal. And I was wondering that in the event of apocalypse, what would I write in it? So here we go. An Optimist Journal of the End of Days. Favorite Things Journal, Wednesday, December 20th. I suppose in light of what's happened and happening, I should try to look on the bright side. I kept a Favorite Things Journal before recent events caused the world to fall into chaos, so in the interest of trying to keep spirits up and sanity intact, I shall keep up the practice of only writing the good things going on in my life. Today I was given the gift of life. An early Christmas present, perhaps? We live in a smallish town about 60 miles outside Cleveland, so luckily we were spared the brunt of the explosion. We have sufficient food, toilet paper, and thank goodness our well water tastes awful, cases of water. The food and water does not require refrigeration. We have plenty of batteries. It would seem we prepared for eventualities, but I'm simply a bit of a hoarder when it comes to things like that. So that came in handy. Monday, December 25th. Merry Christmas to us. My son and I still have enough food to last a while. We are avoiding tap water since some unpleasantness in the neighborhood has led me to be suspicious of its contents. However, thanks to some forward thinking unusual for me, I have been collecting snow to melt over the fire. We don't normally use the fireplace, so in the absence of firewood, I've been burning things around the house. Some things work better than others, though I confess burning the bills was the highlight of my week. I actually haven't had to burn any furniture yet. It's amazing how much crap we can rid ourselves of in a pretty good fire. I had some broken chairs, treated wood unsuitable for burning anyway, so I broke them down and used them to board up the windows and door. I turn on the small battery-powered radio once a day to keep informed. Since we live in a less populated area, the looting hasn't made it to our house yet. Monday, January 1st. I should probably write in this journal more since it's a new year and all. My son and I are home all day, every day, so we have been reading the paperback books and magazines we have, rationing our food supplies, brainstorming survival strategies. For fun, we imagine breaking into bookstores for new reading material, as well as requisite materials from other places, gas, matches, batteries, food. Since we no longer have a car, we're not tempted to drive anywhere far, which is probably for the best anyway. The longer we stay home, the safer we probably are. I've found a way to strain melted snow through cloth and double boil it to rid it of contaminants. I'm sure we'll be able to go to the doctor just to be safe once everything gets back to normal. In the meantime, I'll keep writing. When this is over, it might make me famous, right? Wednesday, January 3rd. So far, the new year continues to smile on us. One of our neighbors finally noticed the smoke from our chimney. Why did it take them so long? And managed to get into our garage. Luckily, I was able to club him over the head with a shovel. I'm contemplating crossing the street to his house and raiding his cabinets for supplies. He might have some meds that'll come in handy since ours are running low. Hopefully he'll have something to help us recover from whatever's wrong. He doesn't look good, So maybe he was sick too, but now we can raid his supplies, so blessing in disguise, right? Only positive things in this journal. Plus, he was pretty thin, so disposing of the body shouldn't be a problem. He broke into our home, breaking and entering. When things get back to normal, we have an airtight case. It was self-defense. Friday, January 5th. Positive things. Positive things. The radio still works. The garage is emptying fast, so less to clean come springtime. Hair's falling out, so less hair to clog the drains. No electricity, so don't have to worry about a short causing a fire. Saturday, January 6th. My pen still works. One less mouth to feed. I'd say he's in a better place, but there's no such place. There's nothing. I'm glad there's nothing. I want nothing. I have plenty of aspirin left, so hopefully my exit will be painless. It shouldn't take many anyway, since I'm so weak. I'm glad there's no afterlife, because telling off any sadistic deity I'd meet would take too much energy anyway. So again, that was the title story from my book, my newest book, An Optimist Journal of the End of Days and Other Stories. I already explained the inspiration for it. I'm really not that dark a person, but I obviously picked the darkest stories for tonight. So I'm going to read one that's a little bit lighter, a little bit funnier, I think, called Ghostwriter. Again, it's another Halloween-themed one. Ghostwriter. Ethan's first shock was waking up in a coffin. His second was realizing it wasn't a prank played by his fellow carousers after another night's drinking binge. He gazed upon the proof. His parents sat amid other black-clad mourners, his friends, co-workers, his estranged sister, and a pastor in a tweed suit. He felt his jaw drop, but when he looked down at his body, it was still closed. Strange that he should feel the same without a body. He strained to remember the details of his death. No bruises appeared on his face or hands, but then he remembered his sister, Alicia, telling him that funeral parlors employed makeup artists. That was probably why. He sat on the coffin's lip and watched the crowd. How depressing. His parents were upset, and the only friends that showed up were drinking buddies and a couple dry-eyed people from the office, probably so they could get the day off. He had no wife, no children. Now he had all the time in the world. He realized he'd never really lived. Crap. Why was he still here? He remembered some movie years ago said ghosts needed to complete unfinished business, something to do with taking care of things they should have done during their lives. There must be something he needed to do. He knew what it had to be, but he was still a bloody coward, even dead. However, necessity pushed him forward. He needed to find a psychic. Luckily, he had seen a sign for one shortly before his untimely demise. Zelda the Magnificent had chosen her name with care. She called herself Zelda after F. Scott Fitzgerald's wife, and she felt the aura she felt the aura that came with the name fit her profession rather well. Closing her eyes, she let her fingers hover over the glowing crystal ball. A small blue-haired octogenarian peered into the orb. The globe's light burned more brightly as Zelda pressed her foot farther down on the pedal beneath the table. "Well?" said the old woman. "Hush!" said Madame Zelda, flooring the cold blue steel. "The dead come and go as they will. They feel no more the rush of mortal life." "But I'm paying by the hour," complained Zelda's only paying customer. "Your husband will come soon, I feel it," said Zelda. "Don't forget to ask him about the insurance policy," said the woman. All the lights extinguished, even the ball, plunging the room into darkness. A luminous, ghostly form stood behind the old woman. "Who the hell are you?" asked Zelda. After Zelda's client had been told their session would reconvene at a later time for a small fee, Madame Z returned to her workplace, switched on the lights, and demanded an explanation. Ethan didn't know where to begin. After a few minutes of confused stuttering, he blurted, "But you're a psychic!" "No, that's just what I tell my clients," said Zelda, taking off her wig and lighting a cigarette. "Now, what I want to know is what the hell you're up to. You can't seriously think I'm going to fall for your ghost trick." She made scare quotes in the air around the words. A cigarette danced loosely in the corner of her mouth as she spoke. Ethan walked through the table to prove his point. "Holographic projector," said Madame Zelda. "What do you think this is, Star Trek?" asked Ethan. "I don't know. You supposed to be an alien or something?" "I'm a ghost. I think that'd be obvious to a psychic." "Try again, sunshine." Ethan concentrated and with considerable effort pushed coins around the table. "Magnets." "So? It's your table. So?" After repeated tests of his veracity, Zelda finally conceded Ethan was telling the truth. She leaned back in her chair, sipped a mint julep, and let Ethan unfold his plans to her. "So, all I need to do is break in, do your dirty work, and I get a cut of the profits?" she said. Ethan nodded with enthusiasm. "I'm in." An hour later, Zelda's clunker was parked behind Ethan's former residence. After the ghost had checked everything out, he gave her a thumbs up, and she walked to the back door. The key was under the mat, just like he said. With security like that, it's a wonder he lived as long as he did, she thought. Once inside, she scanned the cramped house for the object of their desire. Ethan hovered over the desk in the corner. Apparently his parents hadn't cleared everything out yet. Too soon after the funeral, probably still trying to make sense of it all, blah, blah, blah. All she cared about was getting the job done so she could make a profit and they could both depart. "It's in here?" she asked. Ethan nodded. She pulled open the drawer. It was unlocked. The papers were there, just as he had promised. She slid them into the envelope she'd brought, then took out another paper and a pen. Licking the envelope closed, she stuck several stamps along the top edge and walked outside. Ethan followed her closely. She walked to the corner. "Now, do your part, as promised." Ethan took the pen, concentrated some more, and painstakingly scrawled his signature along the bottom line. "Ready?" she asked, holding the envelope before the mailbox. Ethan waited a moment, then nodded again. She dropped it inside. "There," she said. "You have submitted your manuscript to a publisher. If accepted, I'll be left the profits. If not, you still submitted your work. Your business is finished." She smiled. "You can move on now." Ethan grinned. Then the ground opened beneath his feet and he plummeted. The portal closed, leaving behind only a small whiff of smoke and the smell of sulfur. Zelda wiped her hands on her pants and sighed. "They never think that far ahead," she said to no one in particular. Then she turned once more to the house to retrieve any valuables before the parents showed up. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. I thought after how dark the first story was, you might appreciate one that was a little bit lighter in tone, at least at the ending. I hope you can hear me okay. I have no idea. I can't hear myself on Facebook. But the next story I picked in deference to Constance Plumley because we have an ongoing, meme about unicorns. So this one is called Quietus. It is Halloween themed, but it does feature unicorns. And this one, incidentally, I wrote for Friday Flash, which was a meme on Twitter where you would write a flash fiction story once a week. Okay. Quietus. The worst thing about the zombie apocalypse was the damn unicorns. It was easy enough to escape human zombies. They were slow-moving and chronically uncoordinated creatures with very little brain power of their own. Perhaps that was why they hungered for the gray matter of others. The first time Maggie saw an infected unicorn, its matted, yellowing fur, dead eyes, and hideous pink mane made her skin crawl. And that was simply from the color scheme. Its blood-soaked horn was even more gruesome, though not much. However, it had gored some hippies instead of her, so she had counted her blessings and moved on. Too soon, as it turned out, because she had failed to consider one thing. Zombie unicorns were fast. They didn't have wings. They didn't need them. Their feet could trample you in seconds flat, and then the creature could simply lick up gray matter gumbo for dinner. She had barely escaped by turning into an alley too narrow for the beast to fit. After a few minutes, the menacing fiend whinnied and returned to its meal of mashed chippy. She was left alone with her thoughts, most of them unpleasant. She figured it must belong to the herd that escaped from the local crypto zoo. She wondered if their caretakers had died from the virus or a goring. Over time, unicorn sightings became more frequent within the ruined city. Even worse, the animals began to travel in groups. Chronically clumsy unicorns were still deadly if they caught you unawares, and she couldn't count on tie-dye bait hanging around to save her butt. She needed a plan. She had one. It wasn't sane, but little was in this crazy world. So she hid in the same narrow alley as before, only this time she held a lasso. Summers on her uncle's ranch were about to pay off as she waited for one of the pack to wander between its herd and the alley. She spotted a sickly, lavender-colored hide when one creature ventured close. It sniffed the remains she had laid out as bait. They liked their brains fresh, then bent over to lick the carcass. She exited the alley, swinging the lasso while its back was to her. The beast was too engrossed in its meal to notice the sound, but bolted when the thick rope wound about its neck. It jerked Maggie off her feet, yet she recovered quickly enough to mount the loathsome thing. It whinnied and bucked wildly, but she clutched its mane fiercely and pressed her body against it. The smell of its putrefied skin, among other things, made this experience less than pleasant, but in its zombified state, its attention soon returned to the corpse at its feet. It stomped on the head a few times, then bent to nibble at the broken bits of skull. Some brains oozed onto the ground. It fed. She sat up, retrieved a metal rod from her backpack, and extended it. She also unpacked some entrails, which she tied to the end of the rod. When the creature had finished its meal, she held the rod with the intestines dangling out of the creature's reach. Zombie unicorns followed their stomachs, and the beast lurched forward, snapping vainly at the lure. She held it closer to his mouth to slow his motion, farther away to speed it up. Rounding a corner, she came across the rest of the herd. She recognized it immediately from the vomit-colored rainbow of horns and hides. By extending the rod farther, she drove the monstrosity forward. The sleek and glistening guts bounced and swayed, and the beast charged ahead. The other undead raised their heads only seconds before the ravenous creature mowed them down with the long, glittery point of its horn. Only a few creatures on the edge of the group escaped. Now that there was plenty of flesh on the ground, however tainted and mangled, she withdrew the lure so the animal's attention was once again drawn downward. It leaned down to feast. Maggie couldn't quite bring herself to pat the animal on the back. Sitting on the rotting flesh was disgusting enough, though she did manage to croak out, "Good horsey." Indeed, she let the creature finish its meal before using the lure again. Then she could take out the rest of the hellish things before disposing of the last unicorn. That was one problem solved. Now she could only figure out how to get rid of the damn fairies. So that's my unicorn story in honor of Halloween, and also in deference to Constance. And I have a few more picked out. Just so you know, my book, it has a lot of different types of stories in it, not just scary ones. I have a lot of dragon stories in it, fantasy. I have some slice of life. I have a series of stories where I wrote stories inspired by first lines of famous novels, some Shakespeare retellings, some Greek mythology rewrites. So, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Let's see. So the next one is called A Little Bit of Sugar. And this one is a little more homely. It has to do with the grandma, but not in the way that you would think. Just a moment. Okay. So, a little bit of sugar. Grandma smelled. She didn't smell like cookies or fresh-baked bread, but rather a sour combination of old lady, body odor, and Ben Gay. Billy could barely stand to set foot inside the old woman's trailer, but his parents insisted that he do odd jobs for her as part of his weekly chores. He sat and watched Grandma Moira lower herself into the lazy boy in the tiny living room. The wallpaper had long ago faded to the sepia of old photographs. "So, how's your mom and dad?" Billy shrugged. He preferred not to get into discussions with the old woman. She tended to wax nostalgic at the oddest things, and avoiding conversation meant he would finish sooner. "What would you like me to do, Grandma?" He stood up. "Wash dishes? Vacuum?" The old woman stared up at him with dark, moist eyes. The skin of her face sagged under the weight of 80 years, yet intelligence still lingered in the depths of those eyes. "Not just yet, Billy," she said, nodding at the couch. "Why not sit and keep an old woman company?" Billy looked uncertain, but she insisted. "Just for a few minutes." He sat. "I know you've probably got better things to do, but, Grandma, Now, she said, "don't bother denying it. You're young. It's perfectly natural that you'd want to spend time with other kids your age, not hang out with an old woman." She looked at the floor. Billy squirmed. Sinking further into the plush, faded fabric of the couch. "I'm sorry. I was just thinking of Mr. Tinkles," said Grandma Moira. "He hasn't been by in several days. You haven't seen him, have you?" "No," said Billy, struggling to lift himself from the cushions, partially swallowing him. "That's too bad," said Grandma. "I thought maybe you might have seen him on the way here." "Why ask me?" said Bobby. I just came over to help." "Well, of course you did," said Grandma in her most soothing tone. "You're a good boy. Why else would you spend all this time with me?" "Because my parents make me," thought Billy, but he bit his tongue. "Well," said Grandma, slapping her hands on her lap and hoisting herself out of the bulky chair, "you might as well get started on those dishes, and then you can go play with your friends." Billy almost leapt off the couch, except the suction from the cushions prevented it. "You might as well have this," said Grandma Moira, offering him a rose-colored candy dish, "so you can throw it in with the other dishes." The boy reached for the last piece of candy, but hesitated. "Oh, go on," said Grandma Moira. "It's just a little bit of sugar." The boy grabbed the candy, a small rainbow-colored pebble, and tossed it in his mouth. It dissolved instantly. Grandma's eyes hardened. Two bright specks of coal in a face like fading paper. She pushed the boy back onto the couch, and he fell as limp as a rag doll. "It's your own fault, you know," she said. Billy's eyes remained fixed upon the terrifying figure that towered over him. "I didn't want to resort to this, Billy, but you left me little choice." His eyes widened. "What really happened to Mr. Tinkles?" The boy felt his mouth open, the words pouring out before he could stop them. "I ran over him Tuesday with the riding lawnmower." Grandma Moira pursed her lips, considering. "Was it quick?" "No." The word was out before Billy knew he was speaking. She squeezed her eyes shut and leaned heavily on her cane, its gnarled wood supporting her weight. Poor Mr. Tinkles, she murmured. You were the best familiar I've ever had. Billy's jaw slackened. The old woman slumped once again into the overstuffed chair, contemplating her worn slippers. After a few minutes, she seemed to remember the boy's presence. Oh, yes, she said, directing another piercing stare at the boy. Worried I cast a spell on you, aren't you, boy? Billy cringed, digging himself further into the sofa cushions. The old woman cackled. Don't worry, boy, I did no such thing. Billy wanted to run, but his strength had already fled. I drugged you instead, said the old woman, getting up and retrieving the empty candy dish. Witches dabble in herbs anyway, she droned on, picking bits of trash off the table. You might say pharmacology is an interest of mine. She hobbled over to the garbage can and threw away the trash, though the candy coating was a nice touch. Billy struggled to extricate himself from the cushions, but they held him firmly. He would not escape. No, boy, you'll find yourself extremely open to suggestion for the next few hours, said Grandma Moira. She stretched, cracking the muscles in her back. Which is why I'm calling your parents, and you'll confess to them what you did to my cat. She snatched the receiver from the cradle of the old-fashioned phone. Billy sagged, and the old woman cackled again. To my kind boy, spells are prayers. She fixed him with another hard stare. I wouldn't waste my prayers on you. Okay, so that's the end of that one. That's a not-so-nice grandma story. And let's see, how much time do we have? Still got like 15 minutes. Okay. So I am going to do this next one is a story. Let's see. This next one is a story inspired by a first line prompt. It is, all happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way, which is the opening line of Anna Karenina by Leah Tolstoy. So this is the story I came up with for that. All happy families. All happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. What a load of rubbish. Georgia was willing to bet that most happy families were not happy, but merely appeared so to outside observers. At least this was true for her own family. Sure, she was gifted with looks and wealth and plenteous magical abilities, but all that meant was she had more to worry about losing. Were her friends really interested in her, or simply what she could do for them? It was like the lottery. Once you won, you had more friends than you could count, but were they really your friends? In a way, it was worse because she had no basis upon which to judge. At least lottery winners could reasonably suspect that strangers suddenly turned chums might be posers, but the lottery of life had been in her favor since birth. Her father was a powerful wizard, her mother a wealthy socialite and self-funded superhero. None of that hidden identity nonsense for them. They didn't believe in it. But oh, how Georgia wished they did. She fiddled with the chemistry set her best friend Montana had given her for her 16th birthday. Another unfortunately famous child. Her parents were equally well known, though in a different way. She felt with a reasonable amount of certainty at least Montana could be trusted. Well, with one glaring exception. So, when do you think your dad is getting out of super prison? Asked Georgia, mixing another potion in the transparent beaker. I don't know, Montana fumed. It's bad enough that he hasn't been there for most of my birthdays, but you'd think he'd at least want to be there for my sweet 16. Well, it's not for another month, said Georgia, consulting her father's secret potion book, the one she had snagged from the crystal cave below their mansion. He may have been a master of the mystical arts, but he was crap at keeping secrets. From her, anyway. With a few magical phrases, she had easily enchanted her way into his secret workshop. She dropped a bit of purple dust into the beaker. A miniature rainbow briefly poofed above the glass container, and a tiny dove the size of a pencil eraser flew out of its liquid contents before the color prism dissolved back into the glass. And he's been on good behavior, right? Maybe the parole committee will cut him some slack. Said Montana, observing the tiny display thoughtfully. I think it needs more cinnamon. She leaned back and grabbed a bottle from the spice rack they had borrowed from the kitchen. But maybe you're right. There haven't been any incidents other than that toad thing, which hardly counts. She added the cinnamon to the potion, but nothing happened. And that was just a small incident, right? Said Georgia cheerfully. I mean, he didn't really hurt the guy. She shook the beaker and frowned at its contents. Well, he threatened to dissect him, but nothing ever came of it. Montana took the spell book from her friend, tracing the spine with her finger as her eyes skimmed the book's contents. So he changed him back? Asked Georgia, putting down the glass container. Nope, mused Montana, glancing up from the page before her. He said the guy was more agreeable that way. Besides, there's worse things that can happen than getting turned into a toad. Hey, said Georgia brightly, I've got an idea. We haven't included nearly enough ingredient X in this. Just a sec, I think my mom has some left in her lab. Quickly, the girl exited the room, leaving Montana to brood over her father's fate. Only 2 weeks left until her sweet 16. Why did the bastard have to knock over the billionaire's cruise ship? So what if it would have funded his research? She wanted him with her. She was his daughter. She deserved to have her father around, even if he was a brilliant, insane, amoral scientist. Got it. Georgia plopped back down on the plush carpet and added ingredient X to the beaker. When purple foam began to overflow the glass container, she joined hands with her best friend, and they began chanting. Soon the foam dissolved into a small rainbow-colored unicorn with brightly sparkling wings. But the girls continued chanting. Montana smiled. She had never been much of a girly girl, but if that was what her friend wanted to give her for her birthday... Congratulations, she said. It's a horned Pegasus? Georgia grinned broadly. You mean it's an escape plan? She thought directions to the tiny creature. The glittering horn drew a large oval on the container's side, which burned away like acid, then delicately stepped outside and lay down in front of Montana. He can help your father get out for your birthday, she said. Do you think I'd let my one and only friend be sad on her special day? Montana gasped in feigned astonishment, even forgiving her friend for calling her birthday her special day. What was she, 5? She hugged her tightly. And he'd have to go back afterwards? Well, of course, answered Georgia. We can't have him running around unsupervised. It'd be far too dangerous. She didn't have the heart to tell her friend that the tiny little monster would dissolve shortly after he helped her father escape. For a girl with dastardly parents, Montana was far too kind-hearted. Of course, said Montana, contemplating how to hide her father without her friend catching on. She would never send her father back to prison. However, with her burgeoning superpower, she felt confident she could control him. And planting the escape plan in George's mind had been easy enough. After all, he was far older than her friend. Montana grinned, contemplating all the while how she could use her developing mind control powers to help make the world a better place. Hell, the rate her abilities were progressing, she might even be able to use them to make everyone happy. All it would take was a little concentration. Okay, so that's my slightly sinister, slightly sweet story of friendship inspired by the opening line of Anna Karenina. To give you a little taste of one of the other types of stories that still keep in the Halloween mood, I have one that was inspired by Romeo and Juliet. It is an alternate telling or an alternate ending, and it is called What Really Happened to Juliet. Juliet Capulet had always hated her name. A rose by any other name would never smell as sweet if it had been fertilized with the crap her family had inflicted on her. She was dying to escape when the soft-brained Romeo offered to take her away from it all. Sure, he had the attention span of a spaniel, but he was easily as cute and trainable. She could land a new life and piss off her parents in the process. And according to the friar, all she had to do was swallow a little sleeping potion. What the hell, she thought. I've done worse. I've already slept with the enemy. I'm aiding my cousin's killer. How could things get any worse? So she did the deed, took the drugs, slept the sleep of the seemingly dead for days. The friar, their secret conspirator, sent the boy a message telling him of the drug-induced sleep, a scam sure to fool both sets of parents. Unfortunately, Romeo never checked his mail. Instead, his friend informed him of her death, which sent the simpleton running to his lover's tomb to kiss her frozen lips and take his own life. Stupid kid. Grieving parents interred his bones with that of his beloved, consoling themselves that at least the lovers were united in death. Fair Juliet awoke, entwined within her lover's arms, screaming from the cold flesh that had stiffened around her, banging at the wooden lid of their shared coffin and wondering how much longer her new life would last. So that's one of those be careful what you wish for situations. And while I'm finding the next story, because apparently one of my page savers fell out, I want to thank again James Bryant for kicking things off. He did such a good job. We had a little technical difficulties in the beginning, but he was awesome, and I really admire his skill. So, okay, so the next story, let's see, how much time do we have left? Okay, we have 10 minutes left. So, the next story is called Life is Hell, and it was written for a workshop I attended a while ago. The inspiration for the story is going to be pretty obvious once I start reading, but it's, let's just say it's something that most families go through at one point or another when they're having difficulties. So this one is called Life is Hell. Her family was going to hell, and there was nothing she could do about it. The red block letters stood out as she read the notice threatening to turn off her electricity. The foreclosure was wreaking havoc on her nerves. Her husband's benefits were running out, the medical bills were piling high, and the goddamn dog would not stop eating the couch. She went to check on Amanda. The girl lay sleeping in her crib, her forehead beaded with sweat in the sweltering room. Why the hell was it so hot in here? No breeze blew through the open window. She shooed a fly from her daughter's face. What would she do when the benefits ran out? How would her daughter get treatment? Bending to plant a kiss on the girl's forehead, she felt a sudden warmth tug her from behind. She turned and gaped. The wall suddenly funneling back into a bright, spinning vortex. Searing heat pulled her, the room's furniture falling toward the hole, dragging them to the edge. The mother screamed, clutching her unconscious daughter, bolted for the open doorway. Clutching her child, she threw herself into the hall and fell panting against the wall. From the floor outside, she watched the portal expand. Heat emanated from its depths. Its light left its imprint on her retina when she looked away. The image seared into her brain. Soon her husband bounded up the steps. When he saw the vision through the open doorway, he slammed the door shut, wound his family in his arms. I didn't know this would happen, he sobbed. It's fine. It's fine. I can reverse this. It'll be just fine, he said. The mother had her doubts. Acts of God, or mad scientists for that matter, were rarely covered by insurance policies, and their policy would expire at the end of the month. It had been years since she had assisted Ralph in his work, but minions were one luxury they couldn't afford under present circumstances. She donned her goggles, adjusted the scraps on her leather apron, soldered the final piece of the machine into place. This would work. Their home would be destroyed in a matter of hours if the portal expanded exponentially, but Ralph assured her this would work. It needed to work. She could barely stand to look as they aimed the reversal gun at the gaping hole that had once been the heart of their happy home. She thought of their daughter safely stowed at Grandma's house. At least the old bat was useful for something. The damn dog remained confined in a kennel downstairs in deference to her mother-in-law's allergies. Presently, what remained of the house hummed with the machine's vibrations. Electricity crackled. Sparks flew. She took cover behind the protective shield alongside her husband, gazing up at the hole that had once been the nursery. The gun went off, a sudden explosion of light and heat sent them reeling, despite the shield, into the wall beyond. She watched in horror as the portal engulfed the rest of the ceiling. She wondered how long the roof would hold. How much longer did they have? Ralph stood beside her, the expanding circle of fire reflected in his goggles. His mouth gaped. He made no attempt to move, and she screamed, "It's getting worse!" Yanking him from his reverie as woodwork fell around them. "God damn it, Ralph, it's getting worse!" Her husband turned to reply, his face blackened by ash and sweat. They dodged falling debris. She caught the fiery glint of his goggles once more. "I don't know what else to do," he sobbed. She stopped and watched him run through the screaming remains of her former kitchen. Soot and debris rained around her, but none touched. "Screw it, Ralph. We tried it your way." She raised her eyes to the portal and muttered ancient words. Her voice rose until she was screaming above the din, pointing at the light beyond. A fierce growl emanated from its depths. Smiling, she turned, grabbed the small kettle, and hurled it into the flames. There was one horrific howl, then the portal sealed itself and the house was engulfed in silence. She grinned. She had really loved that couch. Besides, their insurance did cover fire damage. So, like I said, it's probably pretty obvious where some of that inspiration came from. And since some of my page markers have disappeared, I am going to wing the next one. Let's see how much time I have left. Apparently none, because my watch died. Okay. I have a couple minutes left. I am going to read a very short one called Wine, since I only have 3 minutes left. If money was the root of all evil, then wine must surely be a close second. Jasper gazed through the rosy depths of the wineglass in his hand, observing the scene beyond with quiet detachment. Wine had always mellowed him, left him feeling a pleasurable distance from his surroundings, as though nothing had happened would affect him at all. He remembered his girlfriend's anger at his apparent coldness when she informed him of her condition. The way she had yelled and screamed and beat her fist against him as he silently took in her news, analyzed the situation, and came to a calm and logical conclusion. As he viewed her prostrate form bent slightly as its image passed through the rounded glass, he admired the beauty of the merlot's hue against what would otherwise have appeared cold and dead. Its rosy glow surrounded her like a halo. Was it Emerson who said that the beautiful was God's handwriting? Jasper smiled and set about worshiping another glass. Okay, and that's it, because my time's about up. I want to thank anyone who attended tonight. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the stories. If you look at the links below, it will direct you to our next reader in about 15 minutes, which is Farrell, an incredible author. They've written 2 books, ? And another book, which is called Mothma, which is a horror-style fairy tale. It is really original and amazing. If you want to buy my book, I would really appreciate it. There is a link down below for Amazon. And also, if you would like an autographed copy, you can PayPal me direct, $29.95, and I would be happy to sign it for you. Just make sure you include your mailing address. And then after Farrell, there will be S.T. Hoover, who is another great author. He has a really scary story that he wrote about kaiju monsters called Siron. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed it, and happy Halloween. And I hope you have, I want to say pleasant dreams, but I guess that wouldn't be thematic. So thank you and good night.